Now, the tariffs that were announced today are supposed to go into effect on Saturday. Right? So we're talking about in 48 hours, a lot of these tariffs going into effect. Now, before we see how the markets react, before we talk about the percentages, before we talk about what's affected, I want to show what the White House put out on their social media in order to announce Liberation Day.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. We are finally putting America first. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. More production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. We're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart. This will be indeed the golden age of America.
Well, he might be on Team Yellow, you need Team Gold, okay? But if you check the stock markets today, there's Team Green and there's Team Red, and Team Red seems to be winning by a mile and a half. I don't know what team you guys support, okay? But I guess I'm on Team Red because they're winning. They're winning by a lot right now. My God, dude. Bloody Thursday, bloody Thursday. Look at these numbers. My God. Apple down 10%, Amazon down 9%, Tesla down 6%, Nvidia down 8%. My God. Meta, which is Facebook, we're talking 9%, Google 4%. These numbers, it's bloody. It is bloody. Now look, it isn't like this everywhere. For example, O'Reilly's Auto Parts, their stock's up because people have made the determination that because of the increased cost on cars, people are going to go out and buy more car parts in order to repair their cars and turn them into fixer-upper projects because it's going to be cheaper than spending another $8,000 on a new car, because there's going to be a significant automobile tariff on top of the across-the-board tariffs that have been implemented. If you're curious as to what has caused this number, and let me just tell you, this is the tariffs being announced. These are the tariffs being announced. The Dow is down 3%. The S&P is down over 4%. Those are big numbers. That's people's retirement savings. That's people's futures with their families, with their loved ones. And they're being whittled away because a lot of people do have, as much as people like to downplay it, a lot of people do have their retirement savings put in the stock market. And the effect of the stock market going down, considering the top 10% of our country has controlled so much wealth, it's so disproportionate. They have a lot in the stock market, and how their capital acts affects all of us, because their capital goes into the inflows and outflows that fuel a lot of the economy now, because they have a disproportionate amount of influence than really I think they should have, but they do have it. And we have to acknowledge that reality in our economy, that the stock market still does matter. If you're curious as to what has caused this, on the announcement, again, none of the tariffs are yet in place. Not a single tariff is in place yet. Not one. Not one. First tariffs come into place this weekend. The reason why is because we have across-the-board tariffs. Here is some numbers from Fox Business. I decided to take it from Fox Business so you guys didn't think I was bullshitting you on some of these numbers, okay? Because these numbers are higher than what I thought than why I thought Trump would ever be crazy enough to do. Let me read you off these numbers for some big trading partners with the United States. Japan, 46% tariff. Taiwan, 64% tariff. Vietnam
is occurred.
90% tariff.
You know, Dylan, I just graduated with a STEM degree in January. This is a great economy to find a job in. God help us all.
Good luck. Hey, it could be worse. You could be a French scientist and you get deported because you said, I think Trump looks a little funny. Okay, so, be careful. EU, 39%. China, 67%. And when you look at the numbers as to what produced it, because these numbers are all over the place. Vietnam has a higher tariff than China? Why does Vietnam have a higher tariff than China? The position of the American government has been very friendly towards the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese are quite friendly with the United States. We see them as an Indo-Pacific potential partner when it comes to Chinese containment, which the Trump administration seems to be pursuing quite aggressively. And from the leaked Pentagon memos we're going to talk about later on today's stream, hell, Chinese containment might be the only somewhat tiny bit consistent part of Trump's foreign policy, this quote-unquote pivot to Asia that Cam Higby and these others, well, it's not Cam Higby. What's his name? I'm trying to remember his name, that one Defense Department. That guy was brought in, whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is, a lot of these numbers seem all over the place. Where do these numbers come from? Well, if you look down there, you can say U.S. discounted reciprocal tariffs, 34%. 20%, 46%, 32%, 24%. So these are the tariffs that we're putting in place. These are the ones that are going in place because of these crazy tariffs from the EU, from China, from Vietnam, from Taiwan, Japan. Where did these numbers come from? Because it's kind of 90% tariff from Vietnam, 64% from Taiwan. I've never heard of such numbers. I mean, the way it's being put here and framed is as if 46% tariff is good because the Vietnamese put a 90% tariff on our goods. And if you're just an everyday American and you see this, tariffs charged to the U.S. 90% from Vietnam, you could buy that. You could really believe that. You could think that's a real thing that's going on, but it's a lie. Vietnam is not charging a 90% tariff on goods. Taiwan isn't charging 64%. Japan isn't charging 46%. The EU is not charging 39%. China is not charging 67%. These are numbers that were created by a math equation that the Trump administration has created in order to determine the calculation of how much we should tariff each country around the world, and in order to institute 60 tariffs. Now, let me tell you what this math equation is, okay? The math equation is you take the total amount of U.S. trade from a country. So the imports, we're importing, let's say, $130 billion roughly from Vietnam, which I believe is about up-to-date numbers. It might be 131. Forgive me for missing a billion, okay? It's just an example. And so we import $131 billion from Vietnam. We export to them back $13 billion. And some goods that maybe American luxury goods bought by, Vietnamese elite, other stuff like that. And we have this trade back and forth. Now, in Vietnam's case, it's particularly interesting because we wanted a lot of companies to shift from China to Vietnam so we could have a safer alternative. Now, what they did is they took that number that we're importing from them at 131, and then they take the number that we export to them, 13, and they minus 13 from 131 billion to get a number of about 120 billion. Then they divide that number by the amount that they've exported to the United States, the 131. So you got 120 something divided by about 130 something billion to get us at about 90%. This is not a 90% tariff. This is a math equation that just got us to 90% as a calculation based upon their trade surplus. I see people in chat saying, I'm lost. I don't understand. To make a long story short, because I see people saying, I'm confused. What? I don't understand that. What? That's the point. The point is it's confusing. The point is you're not supposed to understand it. The point is that everyday Americans who go from their 9-to-5 job, just trying to get on by, that when they're doing that, they can't sit down and dissect complex trade agreements and arrangements between countries because they want to spend the little bit of free time they have with their kids, with their loved ones, eating dinner around the dinner table and such. And so they're not going to sit down and start breaking out the TI calculator in order to figure out whether or not tariff policy with Vietnam is particularly fair, especially when this is a sweeping tariff announcement across 60 countries based upon this model. I mean, look, like these are some of the big ones. I mean, 34%, 20%, 46, 32, 24, based off of these numbers that we've poofed into thin air out of these math equations. Here are some more ones, okay? 61% is what they calculated Moldova's tariffs charged to USA. And then you can see in tiny little text, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. And then USA discounted reciprocal tariff. 31%, a 31% tariff on Moldova, a 32% tariff on Angola, a 11% tariff on the Democratic Republic of Congo, 10% on Jamaica, 16% on Mozambique, 10% on Paraguay, 17% on Zambia, 10% on Lebanon, 10% on Tanzania, 39% on Iraq, 10% on Georgia, 10% on Senegal, 10% on Azerbaijan, 11% on Cameroon, 10% on Uganda, 10% on Albania, 10% on Armenia, 10% on Nepal, 10% on Saint Martin, 41% on the Falkland Islands, the British Falkland Islands, 10% on Kuwait, 10% on Gabon, 10% on Togo, 10% on Suriname, 10% on Belize, 30% on Algeria, 10% on Oman, 10% on Uruguay, Bahamas, 50% on Licio, 10% on Ukraine. Trump has announced no aid packages to Ukraine. He has cut off aid to Ukraine before restoring it to only find out that his unconditional peace deal he was trying to pressure failed because the Russians said no anyway. And instead of a peace deal, instead of a offer of more aid, Ukraine gets a tariff. You want to know what country is not on this list for anyone curious? Does anyone in chat want to guess? I'm sorry, I'm not even going to let you guess. I already see somebody in chat already brought it up. Blue Monkey. Russia. Russia has no tariff placed upon them. And I will say that I saw some people standing up and saying, what do you mean a tariff placed upon Russia? Tariff placed upon Russia. Let me see if I can find this. Because I saw this, I think most notably from Blair White was, we don't import anything from Russia. You're an arsler. Gotcha. Haha. Yeah, we do. Again, the math equation is just hoping that you won't know, that you won't calculate it yourself, that it isn't actually reciprocal tariffs. It has to do with trade deficits where countries are trying to trade goods in the United States and we're punishing them for it. And we're punishing them for it. And we're punishing them for it intensely, quickly, with no sliding scale to do this slowly, to give people time to buy out bulk goods and adjust. We're doing this again, like he's done everything else, with a shotgun approach. For those curious, we import about $3 billion year on year from the Russians. 3.2 or 3.3 last year, I checked. A lot of it being in precious stones. Because, precious stones, if they're from a certain place in the ground, that's where you're going to get them. Either way, we do. And we could have placed tariffs on those goods. We could have gotten that tax revenue that, Donald Trump talks about. And hell, if there's anybody that I think in the United States should be having their goods tariffed, it would probably be those who have chosen to continue to buy Russian goods during this period of time. But nope, no tariff for the Russians, tariffs for the Ukrainians, tariffs to shake up the stock market, tariffs for everybody else. 60 others, none of them Russia. So the longer this goes on, the more likely a recession is. This is just at the warning sign. They just heard that if this is the first shot in a trade war, we've heard the word charge and our markets have already tumbled. They're already down 1,000 points there, 1,000 points here. when the fires actually start, you pop it off, when the rifles start zipping by and, shooting here, shooting there, and we have this going into effect. And then we have reciprocal action from the Europeans, stacked upon the fact that the markets are going to keep going because they're going to figure out, because there's a lot of uncertainty. Oh, Trump's serious. He's actually instituting this. So each day, it's going to be worse, I think. It's going to be worse tomorrow. It's certainly going to be worse on Saturday. And it's going to be worse as it goes through each and every one of these goalposts that the Trump administration has set up to implement the across-the-board tariff, that just tariffs all goods, regardless of what they are, and regardless if we have American replacements, regardless if we're importing an agricultural good that can only be imported from that region of the world because of the climate. Doesn't matter. Boom. Take that. Sucks for you. Sucks for you. You're importing microchips that are manufactured in Taiwan. It could really only be manufactured at the quantity we need in Taiwan right now. Boom. Sucks for you. And they could say, buy American alternatives. You know what's going to happen to those American alternatives? They're going to go up in price too. Some of them, there's not American alternatives available. So they're going to skyrocket in price because you're just going to pass that tax to the consumer. This is one of the largest tax increases in American history. For anybody who's curious about what this means for tax policy, yes, this is, if not the largest, it is one of the largest tax increases being announced by the federal government in American history. And that's going to be passed down to the American consumer. This is going to have the effect of what has been announced so far of about roughly $4,000 for the average resident. It's going to be different in different regions of the country, but it's going to be passed down to the consumer. Each day this passes by and it gets worse. And I wanted to throw out there how CNBC, now this is the Business Finance Network. This is the network that is supposed to go out there and say, what's what for the markets. That's supposed to go up there and defend the markets from overregulation. That's supposed to go up there and defend free trade. It's supposed to go over there and say, hey guys, come on, we need to look out for the stock market. That's their job. Listen to what they had to say from the Finance Network, known for and credited entirely for its credibility on finance. Listen to this.
Market reaction after hours, I've never seen anything like it. This, I think fair to say, is worse than the worst case scenario of the tariffs that many in the market expected the president to impose. You laid out a number of the percentages there, and there's some question of how the administration calculated the percentages that they're responding to in each of these cases. Are they adding in value-added taxes? He talked about, non-tariff barriers as well. So I think while many were hoping that this would eliminate uncertainty, there's going to be more uncertainty in the market, and from those watching policy tomorrow on, if countries push back on how these non-tariff barriers were calculated, will there be wiggle?
I'm wondering what on earth you guys import to USA from an island only inhabited by seals and penguins?
Look, this is, again, the chainsaw approach. It's a chainsaw approach. You're just firing at whatever you can, either to gain this diplomatic leverage, which I'm starting to lose confidence that it is a diplomatic leverage play. Even though I'm sure that is an element of it, I think there's a lot more to it than that he's just going to completely back off of it. He might. If he does, it'll be kind of humiliating. But I'm losing confidence in that outcome. This chainsaw, I mean, for him to come out and take this on the chin and talk about a tough period ahead and start talking about like things are going to be bad for a while. This is what the administration is talking about. That scared me.
Hey man, Zelensky need to pay his bills on the aid we sold him. Trump needs to tax us on Ukrainian grain imports to pay for his delinquency.
And this is another thing. One of the big selling points by the administration is that these tariffs are going to pay for themselves, that we're going to make so much money from these tariffs, we can get rid of the U.S. deficit. It's not happening. It's not happening. And again, if we're talking about paying the U.S. deficit through this, what we're talking about is paying the U.S. deficit through a tax on American consumers who go out and still buy those goods that cost more now. And mind you, like a lot of you guys are going to be thinking, oh, it's when I buy some like luxury good off the counter. If you go out and you buy a car that's manufactured in the United States, it will most likely cost more now. because a lot of those components are manufactured for overseas. And the way that this is being implemented isn't like, hey, this component's imported because it's a 25% auto and auto parts tariff. Oh, it passes into the United States through all these countries, 25% tariff placed. No, 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 no. From the way I read it, it seems like every time it crosses a border, the tariff can continue to stack. These are stackable tariffs. That's why we're seeing some countries like China, we're talking about a 50% tariff because we're talking about stacking 2 tariffs on top of each other. And this is all being announced in one big wave. We're not giving the market enough time to react. We're not giving investors enough time to figure out what the fuck's going on. We're not giving businesses enough time to adjust. And so what we're getting is this call for a manufacturing revolution that is resulting in manufacturing layoffs. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but we've actually had multiple states, auto manufacturers start to announce layoffs in relation to these tariffs. For example, Stellantis is firing 900 auto workers in 5 auto plants across the United States, including in Indiana and Michigan. Whirlpool Corp is firing manufacturing workers in Iowa. And when they were asked, like, why are you firing all these people? Why are you firing all these auto workers? These auto employment jobs that Trump said he was fighting for. Remember when Trump went out there in 2017 and promised to save that auto manufacturing job and that manufacturing job and wouldn't deliver? Well, it's here again. And the reason why these places are getting hit is because they import foreign components. And those costs are going to be borne in part by them. It's going to hurt their manufacturing line. And they also know that if they want to sell any cars overseas, if they want to sell any cars in Canada, if they want to sell any cars in Mexico, or they want to sell any American cars anywhere else, well, guess what? There's going to be reciprocal tariffs on top of already all the problems I've just thrown at you with what this is going to mean for ourselves. We're just talking about what Trump's doing here. Let's not assume that the 60 countries that Trump has decided to pick a fight with, right, are all going to just say, you know what, let's cave to Trump and let's negotiate a better deal so we can decrease our trade surplus and we'll buy more American corn. We'll buy more American whatever. Some of these countries are going to respond with reciprocal tariffs. And what we're seeing from the Canadians is announcements of that. What we're seeing from other countries is announcements of that. We should get ready if this goes through, if the trigger is pulled, which I'm fearing it will be, then we should get ready for a bunch of not only individual trade wars, but we're going to see the European Union unify in order to try to counter Donald Trump's trade war policy. Trump's strategy, I would assume, because this is what would be smart, would be, well, you'd have to divide up the European nations amongst each other. So you try to offer one a good deal and a bunch of others a bad deal, try to make them break rank. But I don't know if that's going to work. I really don't know if that's going to work. And even if it does work, that's not going to be enough to soften the blow here. This is recession baiting. I don't know what to call Trump's economic policy plan here, but recession baiting. Because already what's been implemented is recession baiting. The longer it's going to go on will be recession baiting. And the reciprocal tariffs we're going to get from the Chinese, from the Canadians, who are getting politically rewarded for anti-Americanism, by the way. Of all the times to visit Canada, this would probably be the worst time for an American to go over there and hang out. As less Canadians are coming to the United States on the East Coast and places like Massachusetts and Rhode Island to vacation, they're canceling those trips. Political parties are getting rewarded for anti-Americanism. The liberals were able to recover their election by bashing the United States. Doug Ford saw his approval rating go from the low 30s to over 50% through advocating for tariffs on American goods and taking American liquor off the store shelves. So we're not only economically shooting ourselves in the foot, we're also pissing off a bunch of our friends in the process of doing it. And the threat of a global recession outside of just an American recession, due to us being such a dominant economy on the world stage, is being openly talked about now. And if we set off a global recession, even if we say, never mind, it's not as easy as just wiping your hands of it. It takes time to recover. If people lose jobs in that time, it's not like, oh, I've announced the tariffs are gone, everybody goes back to work. If they lost a job, they lost a job. They now got to go get retrained. They got to go get new employment. They're going to be starting at a lower pay with less benefits, with no pension. And we're seeing with a lot of these federal employees are getting laid off. They're getting laid off after 25, 26, 27 years of service. They're like 3-4 years away from their pension. How are they supposed to survive? They had it planned out, and that plan has been interrupted. And the same thing is true for all these people who are going to be affected by layoffs, whether it be Michigan, whether it be Iowa. And I mean, Michigan's like a swing state. To just talk about chainsaw approach, for Trump to be treating those auto manufacturing workers with such disregard, my goodness. But then we also saw Wisconsin that a lot of these swing states ain't too happy recently, because those special election results were devastating, especially after Elon dumped in so much money. So maybe there's a strategy of rip off the Band-Aid now as far away from the midterms as possible, but if you slide us into a recession, those headlines are going to be remembered, especially when you were elected again off of the mandate of improving the economy. Trump was supposed to be the businessman. Trump is the money man. Trump is the guy who's supposed to make the deals. His 7th bankruptcy cannot be the United States. Okay, guys? That outcome needs to be avoided. But if he keeps making half-assed decision-making like this, I don't know how we avoid that outcome. I mean, like, you ride it out till the midterms, but these types of tariffs is how you get a recession. These types of tariffs is how you don't go through with a fine-tooth comb, you go through with a chainsaw. And the people who are going to be most hurt by this are not going to be the political elites that Donald Trump rails against. It's going to be American consumers. It's going to be people going to the grocery store. My goodness. Ay, ay, ay.